presets and changing them, I found this setting with these EQs before and after to get rid of bottom end going in, to get rid of mid-range coming out, and it was all just like, oh, I don't like it yet, I don't like it yet, oh, that's cool. And that's where it stuck. But this is something that comes in and out. So if I play the pre-chorus, there's kind of a small section, a big section, and you can see, actually, in the editing, I do exactly the same thing with microphones as well. Anytime, this is the mute automation for the drums dirt, which is that distortion. Anytime that comes in, I'm also using the room mics. They recorded room mics, and I didn't like them at all in the verse. It was too messy. But then I wanted some space in the chorus, like, oh, cool, I'll bring that in. So really, that's a parallel, it's a reverb, right? It's a room reverb on my drum kit that only comes in and out. So one of the things as you start playing with this kind of processing is don't expect it to always work all the way through a mix. It changes the character of things. Like that rear bus, if you're mixing a soft acoustic thing, will make it sound much less intimate. It'll sound a bit more like a record, but it'll sound a lot less intimate. So if you want to keep that feeling of really standing next to somebody while they sing to you, well, you can't really use the rear bus. You need to turn it way down. But then when all the instruments come in and it's time for the chorus, unmute it or bring it in or do whatever. Like you've got to play with them too. And the same thing with reverbs. A lot of people set up a reverb and they kind of get a level that doesn't bother them in the verse, but then it's not enough in the chorus. And instead of automating it, which now you can automate everything, they just leave it alone. So now you have a little bit too much reverb in the verse and too little in the chorus when you could have actually made it great. So I automate this stuff a lot. So anyway, here's the drums dirt coming and going. So I can play that same spot and just leave the drums dirt out. Just sounds like nothing but kick drum to me. But with that dirt, all of a sudden the hi-hat and the snare kind of come up to meet it. And you hear the hi-hat kind of pumping to try and get through. And again, it's this, to me, it's a feeling of excitement. It's that hi-hat just desperately trying to get through, but anytime the kick drum hits, it sucks it back down and then it tries to get through. And that really comes, I don't know, it comes through to me in the mix. It actually makes a big difference. So that's some stuff in a session.
Cool.
I had very little on my mix bus because it would just distort, so I couldn't do it. Like Stadium Arcadium, I don't even think, there are a couple of mixes that have an SSL bus compressor, and otherwise there's nothing on the bus except an EQ. But there's some stuff I've mixed in the box that has nothing on the bus because it just sounds worse. So just a limiter at the very end, and I'm barely limiting, like half a dB, just to keep the red lights off. This mix is the opposite of that. This mix, the limiter is actually a huge part of the sound because of the way those drums are. So if you look at this gain reduction meter here, it's there's actually more limiting in the verses because of those kick and snare hits. So I'm getting a good 6 dB of limiting out of this, but it's because it didn't, that huge tribal thump of the kick and snare just didn't happen until I pushed the limiter this hard, which is weird. So
you wouldn't normally do that necessarily.
No.
It's not
Normally, I mean, 2 or 3 dB is a lot for me. But this particular mix, it just needed it. It just, every time I pulled it down, it didn't feel good. And I don't like send really loud mixes and pull them down if someone asks me. I'm always thinking, because people talk about Metallica stuff, that like, oh my God, is this too loud? And I'm always trying to pull it down. So I always pull it down as much as I possibly can without losing it. And this one just needed to be this loud. And no one ever said, oh, by the way, this mix is too loud. So, but obviously it looks a lot like a square wave, but that's all right, you know.
So sometimes you'd never use. I'm not a limit, but you'd never use like the Fairchild or the Pultec or anything for warmth. It just seems that a lot of people these days, when they're mixing the box to make up.
That's not true. This Fairchild is not limiting at all. This is just for a little bit of the harmonic distortion because like I was saying before, the Fairchild sounds great, but the reason it sounds great isn't just the limiter. It's the input and output transformers. It's the fact that it's overbuilt to US military specs, so every time there should be one tube, there are two tubes, because each one works half as hard, therefore they last longer, therefore stuff doesn't break. That's why it sounds good. It's basically got a high pass and a low pass filter and a harmonic distortion generator built in. So I'm using that, but I only have it mixed like 50%, and there's absolutely no limiting going on. So this is nothing but color, but you can hear it. You can definitely hear it. But it's a little bit of presence and the ride cymbal, and it's basically just some sheeny top EQ. Now, I could have just EQ'd it, but this is just a different sort of top end EQ. Which means when it goes through, there is a Pultec on here, I don't have to boost as much with the Pultec EQ. And the Pultec style EQ is just really broad, and that's why I like it on a mix. And I boost low end, it's a happy face EQ. It's 100 hertz and 10K, and it just saves me EQing individually on different tracks. I happen to like things kind of bright. So if I've got a bright mix bus, it's like I've got a bright console. So I don't have to go through, and it's really because I'm lazy. I don't want to put 100 EQs in. If I can EQ it once, genius, you know.
This is something you often do, you'd say?
Yeah, absolutely. My template, which is always changing, has some version of a compressor and an EQ and a final limiter on it all the time, and I'm always listening to it. That's what my console sounds like, is my theory about it. But you've got to be careful, because sometimes you put so much in there. Like for a while, I had a tape emulation plugin on there, crushing things. And no matter what I did, oh man, this sounds great. And then you start to hear things, you get used to the way stuff sounds, and then you start to recognize it, like the way people recognize auto-tune now. When it first came out, it was magic. Nobody could hear it. It's like, oh my God, everything's just in tune. This is incredible. And then you start to hear the artifacts after they've been around for a while. And I realized after about a month that I had to get rid of that plugin, because every single mix was just getting destroyed. So you do have to be careful.
Some people will use 3 on it. Chad Blake will have 3.
Yeah, well, and Chad's thing, and actually I copy that a little bit. Chad really helped me out when I was transitioning into the box. I had gone, actually, I know him, so I'd gone to his house for lunch, and I was going to grill him about how I was going to mix in Pro Tools instead of on my console. And I realized on the drive over that I'm a complete idiot. All I needed to know was that he mixes in Pro Tools and not on the console. And if he can do it and make records that sound way better than anything I can do, then it's fine. It's down to me. It's not down to some trick. So, but his theory on especially the mix bus is you have lots of processes and each one is just doing a little bit. The less you make each part do, the more sort of in its comfort zone and the fewer surprises you'll get and the better it will sound. And I think mine has evolved to be pretty much the same sort of thing.
Chad Blake is residing in Rhyadr, or very close to where I grew up, 25 miles.
Right, yeah, just outside. If you guys don't know, is there anyone in the room who doesn't know Chad Blake? There's got to be people. There are way more people in here who don't know Chad Blake. Come on. Look him up. It's T-Chad, T-C-H-A-D, Chad Blake. He's mixed tons and tons and tons of stuff. But if you want one of the coolest records ever made, listen to the first Latin Playboys record. It's eponymous. Latin Playboys, Latin Playboys. It's 2 of the guys from Los Lobos, Chad Blake and Mitchell Froome, and it is a super cool lo-fi, one of the best records ever made, I would say. Most of it made on a 4-track cassette, and it's incredible.
Cool.
So.
Great.
Yes! All right.
Well, that brings that to an end then.
All right.
I'd just like to make a note that the Audrey sessions are as a Pro Tools demo.
All right. Yeah.
This is so some of these techniques are available free to download from Avid, or
it's the demo session that comes with Pro Tools. So, and I think it has 2 parallel mix buses on it. I set it up in an easier way.
And the mono kick and snare.
Yeah,
and
a lot of stuff.
Sort of stuff.
And all done with the stock Pro Tools plugins. Like, it doesn't need to be expensive stuff.
So if you wanted to check this out, and I do it with a lot of my students, I leave it on a computer, the Audrey sessions, you can check out that some of those techniques, as mixed by Andrew Scheps here, using DigiDesign or Avid plugins, so you can check it out. They'll work in I don't know if they work in the labs anymore. I'm not sure because we've moved again, haven't we? It'll work in the studios anyway. I think you can find it on the internet.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I think I found it. Audrey sessions anyway. And you produce and mix that.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting also to listen to the production and the sort of recording of each element because where was that done? And
that was recorded at Sound Factory, which is the sister studio to Sunset Sound in Los Angeles. And very quickly, I was hired. Basically, the band did the record themselves. They got picked up by a label. The label wanted to remix the album, and I heard it and said, "Well, okay, but the drums are really weird on a few of these songs. I'd like to recut the drums." And then in the meantime, they'd written a couple more songs, so we had. Do we have 2 days of studio time? It might have been 1. I think maybe we had 2, and we recorded 4 songs from scratch and replaced drums on 7, and then went and mixed the record. So very, very quick. But yeah, super talented songwriter who's now, his project now is called Low Roar, which is very different, but very, very cool.
Anyway, that stuff can be checked out. You can find a session on the internet, or I leave them on some computers, which you can look at that sort of stuff using stock plugins, basically.
Yeah.
And I really like it, and I use it as part of this, as here's a template,
right?
From somebody who knows
something.
Shall we open up to the floor then? Like questions, hands up. First hand.
So in your career, you've done a lot of work in studios in both the UK and the US. Recently, I've been looking at the prospect of moving out to the US, and I was just wondering if there were any fundamental differences between the way studios operate out there opposed to over here.
No, I think that just in general, stuff is slightly more formalized here than it is in the States. It's the Wild West out there. Everybody does whatever the hell they want. But it used to be pretty much the same thing, where there were runners who were T-boys, and then you'd be an assistant engineer, and then you'd be an engineer. Way back in the day, especially at a place like Abbey Road, there was this progression of first you were a tech, then you were a mastering engineer, and then you might finally get into the studios. So that, I don't think exists here either. No, it's very similar. It's just like here, though, there are very, very few of them. As commercial studios that have a full staff, the supply has dwindled. I mean, it's got to be 20% of what there was 10 years ago. So it's just difficult. But no, I mean, they're pretty much the same. Any commercial studio is going to be the same. There'll be a staff of assistants who know the rooms and can help set up. And yeah.
I mean, do you find there's still a lot of in-house engineers around, or is it predominantly freelance?
It's predominantly freelance, and a lot of that came from taxes, because if you're an employee, then you have to have health insurance, because in the States, there's no NHS. So every assistant was fired in the 90s and made to be freelance. So house engineers, in terms of someone where you could book a studio and the engineer comes with it to record your record, those are not that common, though they're probably more common now, actually, because it's basically an engineer sets up a studio and like, hey, come on, bands come in, there's a package deal or something like that. But there's really only ever been staff assistants. And then at the bigger studios like A&M, which is now Henson, they're actually a union house, which is very strange for music recording. It's more like the television thing. And they have always actually had staff engineers, but there are very, very few of those.
Do you think Americans are better at recording and mixing than British people?
I think the Welsh are the best.
Well, the people residing in Wales, maybe, you and Chad?
No, not. I mean, look, most of my favorite bands are English, and those records were made here. Some of the best producers in the history of music. I prefer the English style of record making, actually. All of the, I fucking hate the Beach Boys. Hate them. I don't like the production and I don't like the music, and I'm in the minority, but I am not a fan of this sort of American way of doing this. I love a lot of the American rock, but I hate metal. I'm not a metal, so no, I like, for the early stuff, the fact that John Leckie engineered the first XTC record is just genius to me. Like, really? That he did that, and then he did the Bends, and like, if you don't know John Leckie, look that guy up.
Stone Roses, really. I mean,
Yeah, for the UK, I mean, they never really exported.
Really, no, they were massive.
Yeah, but
the enemy
nobody knew
didn't
them in
stop
the
banging
States.
on them for 6 years solid.
Yeah. So there is a whole sort of thing of British music which I don't get, because I think there's a lot of stuff that didn't export that you just don't know and you don't grow up with. But yeah, in general, I prefer most UK bands and production styles, I'd say.
Okay.
It's a really dangerous question.
I just say in general that there's a lot. You know, if you look at the names out there, a lot of them are big American guys, and there's not that many British. If you look at mixers, for instance, how many people are British and mixing on your level? Spike Stent and Chenzo Townsend, and that's about it. Oh, and Elmhurst.
Yeah, but it's also...
How many Americans?
It's population theory. You know.
Okay, there's more Americans.
I think percentage-wise, you might have us beat.
That's true. That's true. Okay, cool. Sorry.
So that's kind of like a double-barreled thing here. So you've moved from hardware to the digital domain.